Professor Brandon Sugiyama to the stage, and let's just welcome him. Yeah.
Well, hello. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to day 2 of CoMotion. How's it going out there? All right. That is the energy we need for this panel. Today's panel is called Designing the Future, and I'd like to welcome the panelists. First up, we have Eric Anderson, co-founder and design principal of Core Designs. Core Designs creates live visual experiences for entertainment and installations. Next up, we have Cynthia Bryan, back on stage, co-founder and design director of Sai Sai Mai Mai. Sai Sai Mai Mai creates digital and experiential design solutions. Next is Eddie Nieto, partner and creative director of Hobbs, who is also a MOMI alum. Next is Itai Tavel, creative director and motion lead of Hornet. Hornet is a multidisciplinary production studio. And last but not least is Justin Sotil Jackson, director of motion at Pearl Fisher. Pearl Fisher is an independent brand design agency. All right, so our panel is Designing the Future. Motion design is an ever-evolving field, and with the introduction of new technologies comes new opportunities. Our conversation today will focus on how technology plays a vital role in your creative workflow. At last year's CoMotion, artificial intelligence was a bit of the elephant in the room. We mentioned it, but we kind of tiptoed around it. In this panel, we will try to address it head on. But to start the conversation, I'd like to discuss the future of design through the lens of tradition. Reminder that these questions were submitted by students, and they reflect their interests and their concerns on these topics. I'd like to direct the first question to Justin and then Eddie. In our world of motion design, digital tools are pretty much the default. It's understood that we're going to be working on a computer. When and why do you choose to go analog, tactile, or practical in your techniques? And the second part of that question is, do you see growth in using more traditional methods and aesthetics? And if so, how does it impact your creative production process? Justin?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I grew up with practical effects and loving practical effects. Like Indiana Jones, the face melt. It was fucking spooky because it was real. I grew up with Pee-wee's Playhouse, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Large Marge sent you. And it was just this tactile feeling of being in a world that existed. And I think when I first started out my career, I felt like I missed that window a little bit where it was all CGI all the time. And then I had a little bit of a panic attack where I just wanted to leave my computer for a bit and play around with something that was just tangible. And luckily, I was able to work with people who, they helped me into that and helped me kind of like express that in a way of pulling away from the computer and pulling out the green screen and playing around with stuff that was in real life. So I think even like brands that I currently work on, they're also gung-ho about that. Like we did a project for a big coffee brand. I'm not going to say the name, you know it. NDA says I can't. But they wanted something that kind of gave the feeling of like a handmade coffee. So we just decided to 3D print some stuff, throw it into a big old fish tank, dump some coffee in it, and then like play with some creamer instead of doing the Houdini Cinema 4D route. And they were stoked. And I loved it because it was just a way to get away from the computer for a bit and play around with real life so that it felt a little bit more handmade. But not to say that like I'd love CGI as well, but there's also the opportunity to mix those two, to kind of bring like a beautiful hybrid of 3D practical effects. The way that you do it makes it just feel right. And I think that that was something that I love where I work now because I have a team that also believes that same philosophy, and it's definitely, I think to answer your second question, it's coming back in the same way that we kind of crave this analog, like vinyl collecting. we want Blockbuster. Like everything, like you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket, but we're collecting vinyl. We're listening to cassettes. And in the way that we just kind of crave a little bit more of this analog feeling of human. And I think that's also, we're going to talk a little bit about AI today, but that human feel is definitely something that we're craving a little bit more. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that in my daily.
Wow, that's fantastic. Eddie?
Hi. Oh, there you go.
Third time's the charm, Eddie. Third time's the charm.
Technology is crazy.
This is so tactile.
Tactile. Okay, so a little background, because I know Hobbs can be a little hard to figure out from the outside. We deal primarily with UX motion. So we're oftentimes working with surfaces or screens, we call them surfaces, where there's an interactive component and a user. So that could be your phone, a smartwatch, a car. And so the way that we think about tactility is really in the act of touching. So like where a calculator used to have buttons, now it's just on your screen. And so there's a marriage between the physical hardware and the software experience that we're often playing with or trying to understand. And animation in general is a challenge to imbue in these experiences. So oftentimes we find that we need to be making a constant case that by adding animation, you're actually increasing the functionality, the value, the user experience of that surface. That's tactile in and of itself. But then you can, and you know, that's where a lot of like our like vector, smooth, buttery motion, that's why it's easy to implement and looks good, it performs well. But where we're able to find moments that clients do crave a little bit of that humanity, a little bit of that handcrafted skill, it still needs to come from a place of like systemization. Like, not only are we going to give you this like very refined, you know, frame by frame crafted piece, but we're also going to give you the tools and the guidelines to be able to like take that and run and build upon it. Because we don't want to be churning and churning on the same thing forever. Like we figured it out, and here's the tool, and like here are the guidelines. And so I think a lot of it to like really win over clients, to get buy-in from people, it's about having a system, a reason, a functional like application of that idea that says not only does it work, but it looks great. And it's easy to implement. Like we figured all that out. So we love tactile things and we love textures and things, but like it can be harder like at the end of the day. So by putting the extra time and giving someone like the easiness to say, oh yeah, let's do that, and like having their bosses be like, yeah, that looks great, we can do that. It feels really good, but I think it's like understanding that you're proposing something that is more challenging, and so you really need to like come with like a proposal of like, hey, this really is valuable, and we can do that for you. So being aware of the context of that project is what like really allows you to like sneak in those moments of tactility that feel a little bit more handcrafted than like purely a vector piece or like, you know, traditionally you know, just keyframed ideas or something like that.
Nice. This next question is directed towards Cynthia and then Eric. So during their time here in MOMI, most of the students' work conveniently fits within a 16:9 screen or sometimes a 9:16 for mobile. But there's so much more to explore out there, and I liked what Eddie was saying about, you know, surfaces. Can you share your experience working in unique mediums, and what can the next generation of motion designers look forward to experimenting with? Cynthia?
Yeah, first I think 16:9 and 9:16 is just part of our screen families and the canvas families. So I actually I work a lot with the applications or experiences as small as on your phone and to a full immersive room experiences. So they're actually two very different monsters or creatures. Because when it's on your phone, that you pretty much know where the eye are looking and how you're going to interactive. So it's pretty more in like traditional UI UX route. So you're going to understanding the user experience and the design in a way that fits it's on a mobile. But when it's living in physical immersive experiences, it has a lot to do with the physical space design, like where the screen is it interactive, and what is the vibe we want to create for this moment, and is there a story, is there the content driven for the room, for the screen, for the content. So then we start to really think about this UX happening inside of the physical room. So where you look at the screen, if let's say screen is very big, because you can only turn into one direction, and is it interactive? So is it interactive from a kiosk, or there is a sensor, and do we have signifier or something tell people how to interact and say something to the screen and do something with it, and where to look, and what's the step from the beginning to the end, and how to navigate smoothly throughout the entire experience. And so there's a lot to think into this whole experiential design. This part I really like about it. We also consider sound design as a very important part of immersive experience as well. So everything, I think it's breaching out from 16 by 9 or 9 by 16, but it's also sharing something similar in the thinking process, is what we are making, what experience we're creating, and what the factors and nuance we need to take into considerations to really make our design working in either it's on a mobile or in a physical space.
Interesting. Eric?
Check, check. All right.
There you go.
Yeah, so in the live event space and in concerts, we end up kind of having to do both of these things. So you have a lot of customization that we have to do for custom stages, custom designs, and then on top of that, you have a whole lot of festivals and things like that where artists are touring and they're going and they're showing up somewhere, and there's a surface that they didn't dictate what that is. So that's where whenever we make content or anything like that, we have to think about it in both of those contexts. You're almost always making something that's going to be for a headline tour where they get to decide everything, and then you're going to be making things that then that content needs to be recontextualized for festival circuits, stuff like that. For us, really, one of the big parts of it is trying, and this is a huge barrier, I think, from people going from just animating on a screen to figuring out what the context that's going to be when it's on a stage with an artist and performers and choreography and lighting and special effects and all those things. It's a really different way of having to design and think about what you're doing, because you're part of the story, you're not the whole story. So a lot of that too is we use a lot of black space, not purposefully going to the edges of the surface, and creating a frame that then you are able to move in and out of. And so your whole story that you're telling and the virtual set you're creating isn't contextualized just by the exact aspect ratio, if that makes sense. And then, we also have to make things where you think about it based on what is your sort of hero image and your framing, and then what are all these assets that you're gonna have as well. Especially in the electronic music world, where some of those festivals, the screens aren't standard at all. They're insane, and you have to figure out how to do all these different textures all over the place. So building content with these assets that come with it that then can be put on the screen on day of show when you're going for the festivals.
So you're talking about experiences and spaces and interactivity. How do students prepare for that? How do students learn how to do that? Back to both of you.
I can share it because when I started, I was a graphic designer. I'm mostly doing branding and animated logos. It had really nothing to do interactive design at all. But this is always my passion, so I like to push forward into doing something similar in that area, territory. Even it's not totally functioning. Even it's just a prototype, just a motion sample. So and by doing that, I actually got opportunity. Some creative director, they want to bring me onto a project, just just to try me out. And I did learn a lot through just working with more experienced people, and start to really step into doing more interactive projects and immersive experience design. And I think because it's not like it's kind of abstract and it's not probably not a major in the university, but your motion is a very important, tool and the skill needed in this industry. Like almost every piece we produce is some sort of motion, animated media. Almost nothing was ever static. So I would say this is a necessary skill to have in this territory. We just need to, be open-minded and pursuing this project that might interest you or you're passionate about, and just keep going to that like angle, and then I think you will find it.
And I would say, I mean, for anyone who wants to work in live music, live events, and be a part of that, like, you've got to love those things. You need to go see them. You need to go see shows. You need to decide what you like about them. And even though it's kind of unique, I feel like we joke a lot about how we'll go to one of our shows and then you'll pull just a random fan aside at the end. And you're like, "What did you think about the lighting?" And they're like, "There was lights, yeah, that's great." And you're like, "You weren't looking at that at all," which is good. It takes the pressure off a little bit, but a lot of the things that you do well in that are things that are felt more than they're actually seen. That's what good lighting is. That's what good stage design. That's what good content is it's not distracting you away from the performance. It's seamlessly part of that. So I think one is finding what you like about those shows, starting to pay more attention to those. Don't get lost in just looking at the artists. Look at the context you see them in. And then start designing that stuff on your own. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like, the live design industry is relatively new compared to almost any other industry that would use motion graphics or anything like that. Artists haven't been carrying video walls and everything for 30 years ago and stuff like that. This is relatively new and a lot more artists are getting access to those things through festivals, everything, so they want visuals. And as a result, there's a lot of really, really bad visuals that are done. There's a lot of really bad stuff because the person making it, they're thinking about what they're making, they're not thinking about the context. So I would really encourage that, like, see what is out there at shows, what looks good to you, what makes you really feel like this is something that matches the whole vibe of the set and everything, and then just start designing those things.
Interesting. Okay, so let's start. Oh,
I wonder if I could just add on.
Please do, please do. Yeah.
Because what you just said, just going to shows, I think I was in Scout. I graduated 2015. I think it was a year before that I had a class with John Collette, and we were sitting there, and he just kind of had this is streaming had taken off. Netflix was everyone, it was relatively new, but it's that was what we did in college. Everyone's sharing an account. And he was like, "How many of you watch TV?" And no one raised their hands. And he's like, "Wait, so you're all in a major that primarily focuses around advertising, but none of you watch commercials?" And it was this click of we're not studying a craft we're aiming towards. And that for me was a wake-up call. I was like, well, actually, you're right. I don't want to do that. I want to go into an interactive space. And that's what shifted my own study and my own focus as being part of a college program to say what is it that excites me? Where can I find it? How are they doing it? And really starting to shift. That's it starts to help you narrow your focus and practice the things that you envision truly by looking at what is actually being done in that space and what are the questions that they're asking that surround the animation. Animation is a part of the story, and oftentimes you're working with other people, not just motion designers. So it's you start to build a bit more context around your own work and really studying the thing that you're hoping to get at, and why it works and why they do that and what that company's who's there. And I think that really shifts your focus away from I gotta be good at After Effects to how do these projects actually happen, in particular in technologies that are different or we're not here yet, or you're curious about, and really helps you engage with your study of this craft, this medium, which is it has a lot to offer, but also it has a lot to offer. So you can start to narrow the things that you're okay, that's the thing, and how is it being done, and really taking seriously articulating and starting to critique and understand the thing that you're making as you're making it, and being involved with surrounding yourself with it.
I saw you pick up the mic. I was like, you're going to jump in here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just I wanted to add something small about like we do motion design for out of home, for social media, for many different mediums, and I feel like it's all about putting yourself in the viewer's shoes and understanding what this medium entitles, and it's no different than anything that you do here between 69 and 916 and doing an out of home, like it's all like considering the viewer, like let's say out of home billboard stuff doesn't have music. What does that mean about pacing? What does that mean about attention span? What does that mean about getting the whole idea very quickly? And in social media, you need to grab the attention very quickly. And in each medium, there's different things. So as long as you're aware of those things and you put yourself in the viewer or the person who needs to integrate with the medium in some shape or form, I think that's the only thing you need. So all I'm saying is there's no big difference between the different mediums as long as you are considering the viewer or the person who uses it, if it's interactive.
Thank you. Since you've still got the mic, Itai, question for you and then back to Eric. There's been a lot of talk online about the ethics of how to use AI tools, how they're being trained, and also limitations of what the tools can do and what they can output. Itai, I know that you've been experimenting quite a bit and posting your experiments online, integrating tools into your motion design workflow. From your experience, what challenges or considerations should young designers be aware of as they begin experimenting with these tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I know it's a very controversial topic right now. So I think there's I try for myself at least there's a few like pillars that I kind of try to stick with. One of them is not writing down any names of studios or artists, and the other is I think when we say AI, it's like such a big word, and there's so much, AI is integrated into Photoshop and to many different applications. So I think when people like kind of take a step back from AI, it's when we're talking about mid-journey, about like just writing a prompt and hoping for the best. And I think the main thing is just like when you're a creative director, having a vision and when you step into AI to try to get as much of that vision as you can. So like I personally have some rules that are like it has to be like 70% of like the idea in the final result. Like never use AI as the final result. It's just like a stepping stone in between. So just I personally I'm still trying to figure out the best way to incorporate that into streamlining it into production, but currently I'm just playing, and I enjoy, just like I enjoy the craft of motion design and exploring new technologies and new scripts and new. I enjoy the new applications that are now so quickly evolving and changing, and there's new updates every day, and it's crazy. So trying to be respectful of other artists, not to input anything that someone else did, for sure. Ideally, having the idea and the result kind of be similar, because a lot of people can just write a prompt and something will come out that is great, but it's not necessarily what they envisioned. So keeping that in mind, having at least 50% of the time of the actual work being craft, being the design, storyboarding, animation. A lot of times I try to take animations and then manipulate them with AI, and not just writing prompts, and there's so many great programs out there, and I feel like this is where we're going. So just being there and just trying to play with it as much as we can wherever it can help, because it can help. You know, you can write expressions in for After Effects in ChatGPT. You can, it can help you in many, many ways. So being fearful of it is not going to help. Just exploring it and playing with it, and then when something comes up that it's like, maybe it can actually be used, and I'm still exploring it. I don't have the answer of like, this is how you need to use it, but I try to be as cautious and respectful as I can to, the art community when every time I engage in it, because I'm aware of the way it can use it, and way some people around use it. Yeah.
And Eric, we had some discussions yesterday about how you and your team are using it. How are you using it, and what suggestions do you have for students?
So I kind of put it in two categories right now, and as you said, it's really hard to keep up with it because it's happening so fast. But you kind of have AI as a technical tool, and what it can do to the process and aid in the process technically. And then you have it as like the creative ideation side. And I think that's where on this like creative ideation and everything that we do, it all comes down to the story that we're trying to tell and the story that is compelling to anyone who is intaking it. And right now the story with AI is kind of the novelty of it, and that's interesting. But I think when you show somebody something and you say, AI made this, beyond the novelty of it, if it doesn't have the story that's compelling, then I think you didn't do a good enough job. And that's a big part of the what we do creatively is like there's a whole context. There's an artist up there that is doing things. So like if the visual behind it was inspired by or aided by AI, but it helps tell the overall story, then I don't really see a huge problem with that. On the technical side, there is, we use it for things like upscaling, just stuff when, one of the big problems in what we do is that you really have to, in the live industry, it's like you have short timelines for almost everything, and you might have worked really hard on something, gotten all the approvals all the way done, and you're in rehearsals and something changes. The artist wants to change something, and you need to be able to work quickly on very large surfaces. So re-rendering stuff out, everything, it's like you just can't work on the scale that we're often working on. So upscaling in a way that makes things look really good, that's a great tool. There's lots of little ways that you can use it that way. And then back on the creative side, one thing that because what we do inherently requires teams of people to do this, there's never just one individual that's doing everything, and it's a collaboration with the artist, with creative directors, and then the animators, the programmers, everyone who has to do it, the operators who have to do it every night. And we've found that sometimes when you start from just reference images and then you go from reference image to what that first pass is, so the creative directors are often doing the reference images and coming up with the materials and all the things that you want for a given set, design, anything like that. And then a lot of times it's not the creative directors who are actually making the thing. And so that distance sometimes is difficult to reverse, especially on short turnarounds. So what we've found is, as a tool for creative directors, start with reference images, but then go in, and the better that they can come up with something that they've generated and they've tweaked over and over. It's not just putting in a prompt, there it is, make this. It's getting it honed into exactly what you want. Sometimes then it's really helpful to turn around and go to the animation team and say, make exactly this. Don't make something inspired by this, make this, and then make it move, make it do all the things you want.
So quick poll for the people on stage. How many of you have used AI imaging tools for personal use? How many of you have used AI tools in professional use? Okay. For the students in the room, how many of you have used AI imaging tools? How many of you have submitted work to my class using AI? I'm watching all of you. Okay. This next question now, we're going to go back to Cynthia and then also back to Ite. In just the year since last year's CoMotion, Text-to-image tools have really exploded. You know, Midjourney 1, 2, and 3 was like, oh, it's kind of cool. Then later versions were like, a little scarily good. And everybody can use tools like this to output very wild iterations from text prompts. We can animate those images with tools like Runway, and now with the announcement of Sora, we will soon be able to create video from text. So the question is, as it becomes easier and faster to create high-quality images and video in a seemingly endless variety of styles, how can motion designers distinguish our work from others? So Cynthia, first.
I think for motion designers that your work is not high quality images and videos, because that's just a render engine would do. Motion designers, you're thinkers, you have your story in your work. I actually use AI quite often. They're my best friends, but I've never truly inspired by AI, not even a single image. Sometimes I spend 2 hours on Midjourney, and at the end I feel this drowning feeling. I don't know if you have the same feelings, that it just keep giving you similar things, but getting worse and worse, and be like, this is all you can do? But on the other side, I do like to use AI in like a kind of more creative ways. For example, I like ChatGPT more than Midjourney or Stable Diffusion because I use ChatGPT to understand the word I don't understand. For example, it's actually a fast, easy way to kind of get into the subject that you don't quite get it. For example, if I'm going to present to SVP of a big retail company tomorrow, and I would be like, so what's the KPI of this SVP from this big retail company, what they're looking for, what's their goal, what's their annual check-in, what's their target they want to reach. And then I will see, because you always wanted to understand what your client is looking for, then you pull their KPI into your work. So I would be like, as I will present in a way, be like, so my work can help you hit your KPI. So that's actually a creative way I want to share to use ChatGPT is to actually understand something, like reverse engineering almost, and then just get a different perspective, especially for the subject matter that you don't really understand. So I think it's a quick way to get some answers.
Interesting. Itai?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Cynthia about the story, and I would also add emotion to it. That's something that AI can't produce as well as humans do. But I think the initial question of how we can differentiate ourselves is a much bigger question with the rapid, very quick evolving AI. I think in order to look at the future, we need to look at the past and see, and I think that so far we have evolved through technology. So whenever there was a big shift in technology, we from the realism movement that was so big, and then photography came about, and that you could create much better images than any painter could. And then expressionism came about, and cubism, and so many different art movements that were so expressionism, and I think that's where we tend to move forward as a species, like as in art, when the technology progresses, we kind of evolve, and I hope that's what's going to happen this time as well.
Okay, thank you for your answers. I'm going to bounce this final question to Eddie and then Justin. So, students come to SCAD because they're passionate about art and design, and in our department, we empower them to express themselves and share their creative vision with others. And at the same time, as you've seen throughout the weekend, our students are very career-oriented, and they have concerns about how to navigate an industry and market which seems very competitive and ever-changing. So what advice can you offer for how students can best prepare for this rapidly evolving design field? And do you have any tangible suggestions for how to adapt to and embrace new technology? I know we kind of touched on that earlier, but Eddie and then Justin.
Yeah, I think Cynthia said it best so far. Motion design, we're designers, and design comes with the caveat of you're solving a communication problem in our way. And so, you know, for Hobbs, the people that excite us, that interest us, not even students, but just like staff, freelancers, other studios, industry people, like that we just really get excited about are the people that really show that they're thinking about what they're doing. That they have a reason and a concept for the things that they're exploring, that they can show you that process, why it pivoted at one point. So, you know, an immediate example is like, I love seeing your guys' work in the interviews, but I also want to see how you got there. Like, I want to see the thought process, the challenge that came with it, and why you solved that problem that way. Because, you know, something I used to struggle with was, did I do, you know, my title sequence class was like, did I do the best title sequence? Is this the right answer? And it's like, the reality is, you could do it 1,000 different ways. But you pick one, and you study it, and you really need to, like, understand it and create kind of, like, context for, like, the decisions forward and try them and test them. And I think what ultimately, like, what makes a really good designer overall is someone that is understanding of, like, the goal, the end user, how it's going to be received, what the message is, and, like, then discovering and working through the most effective way to do that. So whether it's through After Effects or Cinema or Blender or whatever, AI, like, ultimately you're the designer. You're creating that instance for that message to get across. And so it can look beautiful, but like that kind of like adaptability and that kind of reasoning and showcasing that, I think that's what gets a lot of people excited, because as students, we would be delighted if you're absolute top-notch rock stars, but no one truly expects that. Like they want people that will grow, that are eager, that are like able to adapt. And the best thing that for us that we look for is like, this person's thinking, and they're thinking about what they're doing, and they're like interested, and they're like working through stuff, and we can surround them with support that can guide that. But like the thing that's most exciting isn't necessarily always like technical. It's like, what's like, why are you in, like you're struggling with it, and you're like trying to figure it out. And I think that interest is like ultimately like the golden nugget that like breeds somebody that is like just like super gung-ho about like, yes, I want to figure this out. Like I'm going to latch on and can use tools like AI to like maybe help them see that vision through where like they don't have the skills to do it, but at least can help sell an idea that's like, you know what, you're right, that is good. We should do that handcrafted thing, and so on. So I think those are the ways that you can put less emphasis or like less pressure on like, I need to learn the thing, to like, no, like listen to me, here's how I'm thinking about this, and there's other people that can collaborate to like be teamwork in getting that project off the ground, and it breeds better collaboration, I think, and better conversation just about like why we're doing what we're doing. So a little bit different of an answer maybe, but like, yeah, it's just like showing that thinking and that process really is like, that's the gold nugget for us, I think.
Oh. And Justin, same question to you. How can students best prepare for this rapidly evolving design field?
Yeah, I mean, Eddie's like right on the mark with storytelling. I mean, it's as long as if you have a strong narrative, you have the heart that kind of is the spine behind what you're doing, I think that it makes you just an immediately stronger person and a stronger artist. And I think that there's one thing I like, thinking about AI as the tool kind of going forward in this space is that there's one thing that AI I don't think will ever have that you do, and it's taste. And I think that AI will always be something that it's a tool that it will always need like a human chaperone to kind of guide it around and give you kind of results that you're looking for, but like kind of talking with it and playing around with that. But also like professionally just learning these tools and making sure that, because I like, raise a hand, who here is scared of AI? Yeah, I mean it's spooky, but like I think the more I learned about it, the less afraid I became, because I was like, oh, you were a tool. You can help me. You can be, like Cynthia said, like the best friend. It's like you can kind of be my my little person around me, just kind of helping me make things. Like we do storyboarding a lot with Midjourney, and just like if there are little nuggets that I'm trying to think about that I can't really visualize, and this thing up here, I like just put it into Midjourney, and it's like, oh, okay, great, I can work off of that, and like talking to ChatGPT about like things I know nothing about, but I can put in a script, I can put in an idea, and then it kind of craters it around for me a bit and just kind of gives me a little bit more of a resolve. So these things are tools, upscaling, I do it all the time. But these things they're tools that I kind of learned from the community, and gatekeeping is stupid. We're all here, we're all in the same boat. Like, we need to start sharing things with each other, and that just makes us a stronger unit. Because I know I moved from Baltimore to Virginia to New York, and I knew no one. And being able to talk to this community that was so welcoming made me feel so good about the work that I was doing, and it kind of got me out of this, the imposter syndrome, because it was like, I know that I'm not gonna be better than, like, everybody here is so fucking talented. So I'm like, there's always gonna be someone better than me, but I need to be the best version of myself that I can be. And that's super helpful in my professional life, just to kind of make sure that I am the best person of my version of myself that I could be. And that's by learning through other people, learning about myself. I think also, like, we're day 2, and I think the message that I keep hearing is mental health. Mental health. It's yours. It's your health, and it's something you need to protect.
Yes.
I completely agree, and I just want to add a little bit to like insert some confidence here, because there are always going to be new technologies. Don't you think Adobe today isn't a new technology for people who were doing design 50 years ago? It's completely new. So new technology, I think, is a natural process in our, as we develop more technologies, it's going to happen. And you don't have to conquer every single new technology, because you will be collaborating with different people specializing in different things. Maybe one day I will be collaborating with an AI prompt creator. I'd be happy to do a team player and do the best project ever, like by working with them.
Any other
I would say
answers?
also piggybacking off of that idea of AI not having taste, which I think is like a very good point, and this idea that one of the big questions with AI is the fact checking. Like, how do you know that what it's putting out is factual? But as a creative tool, like, you are the creative fact checker at that point. Like, the designer, your job is to look at this and say what is good, what's not, and whether you're doing that from inspired work that somebody else did, and you're holding these things up and saying what's good about this and how do we draw inspiration from it that somebody else did, or an AI put out, you still have to look at that and decide, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to, how does this fit in the story of what we're doing? So I like that idea of like the creative fact checkers are what you're doing when you're using any of these tools.
Yeah, and there's also like the factor of that there used to be cameras used to be like only for photography, and photographers would use it. And now each person has a camera in their phone. It doesn't mean that everyone is award-winning photographers. We tend to do our best with the tools that we have, and just not being afraid of it and trying to use it, because like I'm old enough to remember when Wacom's became like a new thing, and everyone was like, "Oh no, that's cheating. It's not a real brush. It's not it has as long as we acknowledge that these tools exist for us and to help us with what we want to achieve, and having always a goal or a story or emotion that we want to evoke in our minds when we get there, and finding the right tools to get there, to get to where we want. So I think just playing with all these different tools just would get us to a better place to, to have, a larger range of, a set of tools that we can use to achieve whatever it is that we want. So this is, in my mind, it's just another tool.
All right. Well, that concludes all of the questions that I have. I'd like to open it up to the floor. Please don't be shy. I know this is a really hot topic for everyone. We've got a microphone heading to the back.
Thank you. My name is Davis. I'm a visual effects junior. I wanted to take it a little off AI. You mentioned different screen sizes, adapting to technology. What do you think about motion graphics' role in headsets and other like AR and mixed reality experiences?
I personally haven't done a lot of projects in headsets, but I do have some experiences working in AR. I think this is like the difference of the final format, I would call it. So when we begin a project, the thinking process, the research discovery process is somewhat kind of similar, but we do user experiences a little bit differently. Depends on what the outcome is. So if it's in a headset, that we might consider the canvas more differently. If it's in AR, depends on what kind of AR it is. If you see this AR object in the real world, so we're gonna explore how can we design this AR to make it more interesting. Because if you just see an object in a real world, it's probably not that interesting anymore. So what we can do to bring, AR and VR, just a kind of technology. It doesn't really dictate where your concept is going. It is still going back to like the previous thing we were talking about, is about your content, your story, your concept, and how can you, make this project or make this moment experience in a more memorable way, or what the message you want to deliver through this experience. And then it goes to, okay, what technology you're going to use. So I think these are like the concept and technology part. So they're like, they can come together, but they can also be developed separately.
I probably like last year thought motion and AR was pretty bad. I thought AR was pretty bad, honestly, for a long time. It was very clunky. It's been like, it wasn't only until like recently, I feel like within the last year or two, that it was like, these things felt like constant prototypes, it never really did the thing you wanted. Like you put it on and it worked and it was cool for a while, but it's like, you didn't keep it on. Like, you took it off at the end of and actually, looking ahead to the future, if things are getting better, shouldn't there be less screens around? Shouldn't things just happen where you don't need to pay attention to it? It actually dematerializes, and I think that's where the application of visual elements to help communicate or help guide a user or an experience in AR or VR, you start to kind of think about again, it's part of a bigger story. That's part of a full-on immersive experience. So you're how's your body moving, and how many things are in your periphery? And so it gets you into a really interesting different mindset of okay, if we're gonna do this, if we're really going to invest our time, what is the potential here that I'm not seeing? Because there's a lot. It's still untapped. There's still so more TV and traditional, even on your phone, there's the language and vocabulary for it now, where there wasn't 5 years ago. There's an understanding, big tech companies do a lot of research into how we interact with these things, but that AR, VR space is still relatively untapped. So any of you can step into that game and be here's a cool idea, throw it up on TikTok, on Twitter, and it's boom, it blows up, and it's no one thought about that yet, or no one's visualized that yet, and you guys quite literally are building the skill set to prototype that idea and just put it out there, and that gets attention. So I think be considerate of the new format and really exploit the possibility, because you don't actually have to build it, but if it gets enough traction, someone might be yo, that's dope. Who made that? Where are they? What else did they got in mind? And it really allows you to bring the application of vis effects or motion into a different context that everyone is trying to figure out. And no one is really, I mean, they're experts, but no one's really an expert. Everyone's just it's happening very much in the moment. So I don't know, do it. Make it better, please.
Justin, do you have something to add?
Oh wait, there we go. I also think that like because Apple has now entered the ring into the whole VR space, that's when it's become like a premium item. Like you see the memes online of people driving cars and walking around with it as like a headset that's always on. I think that's kind of opened the space a little bit to like, and now these companies are starting to get on board. Same way that like crypto was a thing for ages, and then all of a sudden like, you know, one thing sprouted up and crypto was like the top of mind. Like mom and dad knew about it, and grandma knew, and I was like, okay, great. Grandma knows Dogecoin, it's the end of the world. But like, so now it's become like, yeah, it's a $3,500 headset, but now it's like, I mean, in the same way that people drive Honda Civics and then they also have like Bugattis, there's a market. Now it's open. It's like Apple has entered this thing that they're going to put a lot of money into, and it's a tangible item, RIP, the Apple car. But it's now something that clients are now getting on board with because they're like, well, Apple's now doing it. So I do think it's something that you should be learning, but also like context. AR is kind of like, you know, using the existing world around you, because that's been around for a bit. We have like the Snapchat lenses, we have the Instagram AR features. So like that's been around for a bit, but like the VR is still something that clients are like, I don't know how this is used, because it is such a full world that we're building rather than using the space around you to kind of assist with that. So, I mean, it's definitely a space that I'm really curious about, more so now because, I mean, the first headset that I ever got, I had like mount cameras around in my bedroom, and like if, you know, something was in the way, it would just kind of flake around and then I would throw up. But then now it's all built in. And everything is just, I mean, you could walk around in this. You can go out into like a backyard, and then there's a whole new world that you can escape to. So I'm really curious just to kind of see how the landscape evolves and learn from this, and how it can be useful, or, you know, how just in general how it evolves.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? Are there any questions up there? Sometimes we forget about all of you up there. No? Questions over here? Yeah.
Oh. Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm a senior studying motion design at SCAD, and I think like what Cynthia said about it just being another tool, like another Adobe, like Adobe a few years ago, After Effects being a new tool, I feel like AI is the same. So I was wondering, like, I've been playing around with Runway for a few months now, and I feel like it's just another tool that I need to practice in order to like really use it effectively. So I was wondering, like, do you have any tips or advice for someone who's just getting started and is learning it?
Runway specifically is a set of different tools. It can upscale, you can clean backgrounds very easily, which I love and use it a lot. You can create depth of field with Luma mats. There's a lot of possibilities there. What I encountered was like I always look for control in these programs, and I think the lack of control that I had in animation was really frustrating for me. So I started creating animations in After Effects and then seeing how I can manipulate them in Runway specifically. But there's a lot more apps that use Stable Diffusion in a more considered way that allows more control, like Comfy UI and other programs that use Stable Diffusion. I always look for how can I control the outcome more and not, rely on the app to create the outcome for me and that's not the lighting that I wanted. This is not the exact pose. So for example, in Midjourney or in Runway, you can say, I want a person to look like they're thinking, and they'll be like this. But if you want them like in a very specific position, you can't do that. But with Kriya, for example, you can. So there's like all these apps in Kriya. you can draw whatever it is that you want, and you get the outcome very quickly, like in real time. So you can control the colors, you can control the composition with the addition of a prompt, and you can play with how much of AI is actually integrated. So you can be like, oh no, I want more of my drawing or my illustration. And you can even connect the screen to it, so you can actually have your After Effects or Cinema 4D screen to take into Kriya, and then you can actually get some really interesting visuals just by trying different prompts, which can actually help you with the R&D and get like, without trying, like it can take days to try different textures and different environment layers and different lightings. And I think just having this access for R&D is super, super helpful. So yeah, like you said, this like gatekeeping is not a good thing. So like if you have any questions specifically, I'm happy to answer afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Are students familiar with what runway is? No? You better learn it. Okay. Next question. Next question. Who has the microphone? Do we want to run to the back? And then we also have one at the front next.
My name's Kyle. I'm a senior motion designer here. I know it's really important to take time away from client projects to pursue passion projects, and it can be really special when a company takes time away from clients and endorses kind of a passion project within. I was wondering, is there any kind of things that you personally might be working on, or anything that you are interested in when you get time away from client work that can push the medium towards a place that hasn't been touched on? So yeah.
So Sasamama, because it's very small, so we always trying to spend some time developing our, kind of studio or / personalized artwork. And we did have this super small client. They need like an interactive window installations. So we present this kind of crazy idea. So, oh, what if you bought a couple LED cubes and then you display in the window, and we'll give you a program. And then when you interact, you scan a QR code and you interact on the program, you can control the cube. And I'm like, great, okay, but we'll put on the cube. And then I have those, like my side artwork going on, was like, how about you just put on my artworks? And they were like super chill. They were like, okay, cool. And we want to rotate, artworks from time to time. Also, they're like local stores. They want to support local artist community as well. And I happen to have local artists. Okay, that's great. So I just introduce you, we can start with my artwork, but then gradually introduce you to other artists so everybody can get some sort of exposure, because the location of the store is pretty good. It's in Chelsea gallery area, so it's like really close to like famous galleries. So that's a very good spot. So I think there's sometimes things did happen like this. So it wasn't super planned or intentional, but it played out in this way. So I do feel like if you have time, pushing yourself doing like a personal artwork can be, a benefit you in a professional way sometimes.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, so one thing that's interesting about both the live industry, but also everything we do, is we make something that, I use this term a lot with our team, which is we make a lot of creative waste. There's a lot of stuff we make that's kind of single purpose, and I think sometimes that can be something that is very exhausting, especially when you're working for a company and a lot of the stuff you're doing is not like under your own direction, stuff like that, but you end up accumulating all this creative waste over time. So one thing that we've really tried to reframe in everything we do is like, how do we look at every project, everything we do, how do we reduce creative waste? How do we make something, and whether it's so that it's not just a portfolio piece and that's its only future use. It's whether it's the assets, the process, anything, like every project that you're working on, even if it's like almost always some way that you can find a creative reuse of something in the future. You know, there's something you can learn from every project, and that really helps you not have to have such a hard line between this is client work, this is my work. It's like you're always building your toolkit, and you're always making things that have this potential for creative reuse down the line.
Yeah, just to jump off that, I think we're always building our toolkit, even in client projects. But in client projects, it's a little bit more difficult sometimes because you have to hit a specific deadline or a specific look or a specific brand guidelines or whatever it is that you need to get to, and there's maybe less room for error or failure. And I think having more like internal projects can really help. I know failure is not a good word. It sounds very negative, but I feel like that's how we learn. That's the only way, like just trying things that not necessarily in our comfort zone, things that we never tried before. That's the only way to grow. So having a playground or this possibility, like internal projects, to try that, I think is very, very helpful. And I try to bring that to my team, and we try to do that in the company. In addition, I would just mention that another thing for the internal project is that I try to do is try to get to create the work that I want to get. So, for example, if we don't have a lot of fashion companies coming to us, so and that's where actually AI will come in handy to first create the brand of this fashion company, and to be able to create the clothing and all this stuff that I wouldn't have the budget to go into a live shooting or actually create any of the clothing, and take that and then create a whole rebrand around it. So again, not using AI as the final outcome, but as the tool to get to what we want. So that's where I find it very useful.
Hello. Oh, that's a good question, by the way. We often get excited. I think at Hobbs, once we toil with something and kind of feel good about it, we're like, cool. What's next problem? But if we're being asked to do, so we historically we did a lot of drone shows, and I know we were talking about this last night, but once we figure out that process, for example, we then become obsessed with refining that process. And oftentimes that can't happen as smoothly. Like during a project we're just trying to get done, you do it like it's the most janky file and things are broken. You're like, dear Lord, I hope this works, and you're like, and you send it and it's good, and you're like, great. At that point, you're like, okay, some things were redundant, some things could have been done a little bit better. We start to refine just kind of the process of reducing creative waste, great word. And how we do that is we talk a lot about this, the idea of building a car. So if you need to get across town once, just walk there. It'll take some time and you'll get there, and it might rain and you'll get there. But if you're doing it a lot, maybe it's time to build something that can get you there faster. And initially that can feel like a big undertaking or it'll take a lot of time, but it might be worth it. It might get you there faster in the end. And so that's just a concept that we talk about. Maybe we need to build a car, build tools or build resources that will ultimately help a repetitive process happen quicker, iterate quicker, because we know it's going to come back. We know we're going to do this type of project or this kind of client or this whatever. And so oftentimes we shift our focus on downtimes, on figuring out those processes and really playing around with techniques that we know we're going to have to interact more. We're anticipating to be more familiar when we're asked about Rive or when we're asked about whatever, and be like, actually, yeah, we have been thinking about that, and we already know the struggle of what's coming, so we can ask better questions and understand the context of things. So we spend a lot of time not only like exploring creatively ideas and things that we don't typically get to do in client projects, but also just like our own internal process to just feel like better refined and ready and prepped for when the kind of projects we want arise, and we're like, actually, yes, we do know how to do that, or we started to understand it better, and can actually be better like critics of like, do we want to implement this new tech now, or go the traditional route? You know, there's always a trade-off, but like the more confident you can be and like refined, and if you have that car, like it'll help. So, good question.
Justin, did you want to jump in on that?
A short little thing. I think even if you know that something's going to get nixed, just do it anyway. Like, just fuck around with it. Because even if you know it's not going to go anywhere, because I've done that before. I'm like guilty of just like putting something in and being like, this is weird. But if it doesn't work, you either learn something about it, or maybe along the line someone will kind of pick it up and expand on that idea. So like, also like, be a little bit passionate about what you kind of put forth in like a weird, wacky way, because maybe it'll work out. And it's just, you kind of have to take that risk with like a bit of that passion.
Do we have time for more questions? Would you, one more question? One more quick question? No? Does anybody? No? Well, JC had his hand up over here.
Okay, so this is specifically about using AI generation in the final result. The big controversy is all about the usage of the training data. And no matter how much you feel about it, do you ever consider like whether your client, company, or whatever will face backlash for having AI generation in their advertisements like Wacom and Wizards of the Coast have had?
I'm sorry, we're out of time for questions. We've got to go.
I'm sorry.
Would anyone like to address that question?
Yeah, well, I don't think companies want that. I think, well, I can say from experience, clients, I won't name names, but asked us not to use AI in many cases. So I don't think that's the world we're living in currently, hopefully. But yeah, again, using it as a tool, I really like like I don't distinguish between AI and, I don't know, Cavalry app, for example, that creates beautiful code-generated animations, or just using it as a tool. Yeah, I can. I think that's the best answer I can give to that. But yeah, the final result is just so, you know, it can be very similar to so many things that we see out there, and I think that's one of the reasons why companies don't necessarily want that. I would say, I guess there's one example where it is beneficial in the creative world is pitches. When you pitch something, a lot of times like it has no money and it has like only like a few days, like can be 2 to 6, 7 days max. And creating a bunch of, you know, very thoughtful 3D assets can be a little bit tricky in this time span. So just showing your intentions, this can be helpful for that. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay, with that, I would like to ask for a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. And before I hand it back up over to the organizers, I want to be selfish and just want to say to all the students, you've been crushing it this weekend. The event has been going smoothly. I've been hearing so many positive things from the professionals. We are so proud of all of your individual accomplishments and all of how you've come together as a community. So that's it.
Thank you again to our moderator, Professor Sugiyama, and our panelists. I'm pretty sure this is very informational, and we all enjoyed the panel. The next panel will be at 4:30. We're going to take a 15 minutes break, actually 20 minutes break, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you.